Okay, let's get started. Good afternoon and good morning. Welcome to the Charlie Mike webinar series hosted by the National Veteran Small Business Coalition. Thank you for joining us today. This webinar is sponsored by BAE Systems and Philips North America. We'd like to thank them for the sponsorship for this webinar. You can also find us on YouTube. Please subscribe. You can look back at previous Charlie Mike webinars the last 2 years. We got veteran focus events that are recorded and testimonials. So please join our YouTube channel. Okay, this webinar has been extended in an hour and a half. It is being recorded and the slides will be sent to attendees by Monday. If you have any questions during the presentation, please write them in the chat, and the mics will be open at the end of this presentation for additional questions. You guys know me. I'm Earl Morgan. I'm the program director for the NVSBC, and it is my pleasure to welcome an old friend. We go back way back, and it's Ira. He's a chief storyteller, and he's going to talk about the power of sales. And we did an event back in 2016 with a big crowd, and people are still talking about his presentation. So pay attention, and Ira, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Earl. Second, I'm bringing this up. Can you see the cover page, Earl?
Yes, I can.
Great. So as Earl mentioned, please, anytime, put questions in the chat box. We're not going to hold the questions till the end. So my program should be ending right around the hour mark. And then I had asked Earl if he wouldn't mind extending it for anybody that wants to stay and ask questions. But I'll be hitting the 1400 or the East Coast time of 2 o'clock for everybody. So keep that in mind. But please, we're going to have a questions. And also we're going to do a couple of things where you guys are going to put information into the chat box. Earl mentioned that you're going to get a copy of the slide. If anybody wants to email me directly, feel free. Just put in the subject line, NVSBC presentation. So a little bit about me, since this is all about vets. I was a medical service corps officer. Here's a picture from just a few years ago, wink, wink, at Fort Sam Houston. All medical personnel, I don't know about it for today, but anybody related to medicine went to Fort Sam Houston. I was not a medical person. I was actually chief information officer and also did public affairs. If you're not familiar with public affairs, it's like marketing in the corporate world. And I did those fields. And that's the kind of person I've been, whether it's high school, college, or my life. I've always been a business person who loves technology with a little bit of a creative side. Don't know how. I always got lucky. So I ended up on the cover of one of the sections back when I was an undergrad at Syracuse. So I'm a orange terp. I went to business school at University of Maryland. Here I am rappelling. I made the cover of the Cadet, which was the name of the magazine or the newspaper for my first ROTC region when we were at Fort Bragg. Love photography. This is one of my favorites. This is a cicada. One of the awesomest things about cicadas is they're so patient. Actually, they don't move much, so it makes it easy to take photos of bugs and flowers. This my wife actually grew this, and it's weirdly one of my favorites. I also teach at the University of Maryland in the fall, so this is my 9th year teaching. This is my class from a couple of years ago, so I just started up on this year's semester, and it's a public speaking storytelling program, and their final is a 5-minute TED Talk. Little on the business side, so I've been doing this business about 22 years now. I've been to 14 countries. I have customers where I've spoken at 11 countries. I've done consulting all around the world and done a variety of what I call affiliate country-based associations from all host of different organizations. So that's one of the coolest things about what I do. Of course, since this program is about storytelling, let me start the more formal part with an interesting story. So I used to work at a government consulting firm. I also live here currently. I've been in the Washington, D.C. area for a variety of years and lived here a couple of different times. And my Steve, who I used to work with years ago, had called me after I started my business. And he said, Ira, we need some help with our story. We're growing like crazy, but we know we're not connecting like we need to. And so what he explained to me was these common issues that I find this with billion-dollar companies as well as small startups that are growing as well, all these different kinds of ideas and challenges. So I had to take the name of the company out. He asked me to do that. So I did take the name of the company out and I just call it ABC Company. This is the exact cover page on their PowerPoint, minus their branding, which you can't see on the top left. I took it all out. But this is the way the slide looked. This is the way the text looked. Now, what you probably aren't looking at, look at bottom left. There's their key message, your technology partner for business success, buried. Now, I also highlighted the word business. Interestingly enough, here they are, they're selling it to the federal government and they're using the phrase business. So they're already trying to differentiate themselves, and yet they're not doing a good job. And so my solution was we would go message maps and message anchors. So message maps are all of the potential high level messages that you would have across what I'm going to talk about in just a couple of minutes, your system of credibility. So think of them as headlines. I call them message anchors, and message maps would be where are these messages in your elevator speech, your capability statement, your capabilities presentation, your website, your LinkedIn, and so forth. How do you differentiate yourselves? Those of you that are new to the government contracting space, it's imperative that you use language called a differentiator, especially in your capability statement. And then when I call your ideal client profile, a more common term today is buyer personas. And then something unique to the chief storyteller is a phrase we've developed called the better tomorrow message. How are you helping your prospects? Also, if you're a sub, your primes, deliver on their promise, which is their promise of a better tomorrow. And think of that as a headline, a hook. It's 10 words or less, and we're also going to talk more about that. So Steve's company, what we did was we came up with this metaphor, and this is also how they were different. They used these powerful, simple images with these awesome messages called the Safe Journey Story. Keep in mind, this is an IT company who's talking about a story of safe journey. Notice that there's a rope bringing everybody together. So they use this Sherpa kind of metaphor where they're bringing everybody together as their guide. They have this amazing set of imagery. It took Steve hours to find the right set of imagery. We took some time, we did research, and they found this one person who had this amazing suite of imagery. And then what we had was these powerful set of images to, questions to match their images. So their question during their capabilities presentation was, as you can see, where do you want to go today? And they used this metaphor of mountain climbing. Now, most people think of mountain climbing as you start at the base camp, which is B, and where do you want to get to the top? That's A, and that's where you stop. If you think about it, you never want to stop on the top of the mountain because that's where it's cold, that's where it's snowy. You're not going to survive very long. Now, you want to achieve the top, of course, but that's not where you want to stay. You want to go back down to point C, the parking lot, the safety spot. So this whole metaphor journey is getting you to the top and getting you down to the bottom safely. So you have this journey together message. Simplistic messaging, you can see. And then their call to action is let us guide your next successful journey. Because of this presentation, they won nearly $100 million in new revenue with a federal government contract. And their entire company embraced this new metaphor around this above and beyond, this metaphor of this mountain across this system of credibility. You can see here some of the areas that we're talking about. And then I like to liken this system of credibility in a matter of circles. So you have in your center your better tomorrow message. That's the 10-word or less powerful headline, this hook that's going to get people to pay attention and go, excuse me? Well, that's interesting. Tell me more. And then in the first circle around the better tomorrow message, you have your priority tools. What are the items, the tools, the success stories, however you're going to transmit the information that are most important in how you engage if you're seeking prime contractors, partners, or direct contracts with the federal government, or if those of you that are commercial, direct to commercial. And in your second circle would be things that are less important. And then you'll see there's question marks about the 6 o'clock and 5:30 mark on the bottom. Those are for what you would customize for your own particular organization, because we haven't met and I don't know your organization. So this is just a suggestion for things to think about. So my big question to you is, we're spending time together today. What do you want to be known for? Before you get in the room, when you're in the room, and when you leave the room, what are the government TOs, the technical officers, the contracting officers, whoever it is that you're talking to, what do you want them to think about? Because as you know, they're inundated with capability statements, requests for meetings, they do requests for quotes, requests for information. There's constant information sharing. How do you separate yourself? So I have a whole set of pillars, and I'm going to share with you just a couple for today. The number one, most important, if you got a bang on my desk kind of thing, jump up and down, is solve their problem. This is what will make your stories, your case studies, your elevator speech, all the other tools in your system of credibility interesting to them, is because you're talking to them about subjects that matter. I did an interview for the Department of Energy presentation that Earl actually was one of the people that was my ambassadors for how I secured that engagement. And he introduced me to the former CTO of the Department of Energy. And Pete had said to me during my interview, you've got to come in and show us that you've done your homework. If you come in presenting a solution, we already know you didn't do your homework. We want people to come in and ask us questions, validate, talk to us as partners. So what problems are you solving for the government? What homework have you done? Your stories must inspire us, or if them, you can replace the word us with them, to action. What's the action that you want? Is it test something? Is it try something? Well, that would be a test. Is it allow us to come in and do some interviews? Whatever it is, to inspire us to get to the next meeting. So, give you another example. This is Mark. We're in e-commerce. Spent some time with him. Same kind of thing, and there's a reason why I brought him up. Is he's a small growing company, just like us. I myself am a CEO of a small growing company. Same kind of issues, same kind of challenges, right? And then he had this aha moment that he was kind enough to allow me to put in here. And when he started thinking about stories and framing them as solutions to problems, things happened. He started to dramatically change how he was approaching. And after 3 months of changing his way of selling, he went from a 20 to an 80% revenue increase. So now his whole message is, it's a habit. And if you were to ask him today, I don't know how many years later it is, probably five-ish from when we first met, he has great success. And the way you do that and keep doing that is align your stories. Now remember, the word story is a proxy for your elevator speech, CAPE statement, capabilities presentation, because these are all words. Customer success stories, use cases, whatever that. These are all words. These are all narratives. So I loosely call them stories to the customers, the prime. So the key learning benefits of today are these 5 big areas. And the most important, it's why I made it number one, is I want you to start thinking like a storyteller, not as a expert that you are, but more of a storyteller. Your first one, certainly your first one, perhaps your second, is more of a sales meeting than it is actually a meeting where you're expressing and demonstrating your expertise. It's usually your elevator speech, capabilities statement, capabilities presentation. Then you get an invitation, and that one might be more technical and might be more hands-on. It could also be still more strategic. And then generally, for sure, your third, fourth, and whatever subsequent meetings you have, you're really getting into the details. Sales story playbook, we're going to talk about. That's one of the things I recommend. And if you're familiar with a story playbook, you don't have to make it exhaustive. You can just put key information in there. I love this quote, found this probably 15, 16 years ago. It's, I don't know how many years old, good 60 years old, and just give you a moment to read it. So back when it came out, McGraw-Hill was trying to demonstrate that they were a resource for sales professionals, and that was what it's all about, is helping you sell better. Where I love this because it's, what do you want to sell me? In the government, this is perfect metaphor and proxy for the government. You know, if you've ever done a sales presentation or capabilities presentation for the government, and oftentimes they will make no faces, show no emotion. They'll just sit there, they'll listen, they'll say thank you because they can't show any favoritism. So how do you get them inspired? So think about a typical sales process, and this is a very simplistic, while it has a lot of complexity behind it, it really falls in these four big categories or four phases or steps, whatever you want to call it. And in the bluish or darkish area on the top, you have passive, meaning you're not doing anything so that your customers or prospects can look. So see, so these are some of the key areas. Now, active means that you are actually doing things to interact with the government or your primes or other partners. Maybe you're doing a joint venture or whatever it might be. And if you're doing commercial, then you're doing your own outreach. So you have the first, which is research they're doing on their behalf. Many research out there shows that typical buyers are doing 80 to 90% of their own research before they even show up. I think that would be less for the government because they don't spend a lot of time doing the research until like the proposals are done. You know, now that the season's over and we're in the new fiscal year, now they're doing the processes, the understanding, the source selection. That's when they really do much more of their due diligence. Prospecting and selling really is behoove upon you. Then you get to the closing part, and then back to the customer. Once they're a customer, what are you doing to extend the relationship and build upon that? So the way that I like to think about storytelling, this is my quote, is sharing your experience such that it's remembered for a lifetime. And to be remembered for a lifetime means that you have to resonate with your prospects and if it's current customers. And that's where storytelling, normal human behavior, if you're sitting down for coffee, breakfast, lunch, dinner, whatever you're doing, you're telling stories. That's what you're doing. You're communicating through stories to build relationships. Our title for today is Stories, a Sales to the Power of Story. So I wanted to share with you a playbook and an idea of how to think about stories. Now, I offer 6 story types, and I'm going to show you the details. And so I remember that Earl promised the slides as well as myself. So this is going to be some small print, but I'm a believer in education. So I want to give you all the tools that you can and also give you about a minute to read it. But these are the 6 story types that I recommend. And here's the thing in the end. You may go, well, is it an empathy story? Is it a differentiation story? I'm not sure. What's the difference? You know what, in the end, truly, what works for you, do that, call it whatever you want. But if you want structure and you want some advice, here are the 6 story types. And there isn't one that is necessarily better. What you do need to remember is, what are your customers' problems? How are your solutions aligned to that? And then look here to see. All right, let me give you a minute to read it over. And again, Earl and myself will have the PDF and you can go back and look at it at your leisure. And if you have questions, feel free, pop them into the chat. Earl is going to be my Vanna White, and he will interject questions as we go along.
Well, I don't look as good as her, but okay. And plus, I'm bald, not blonde.
What's this another phrase? I can't remember. Bald is beautiful or something. I can't remember.
Yeah.
I'm too old to worry about hair.
Yeah, right.
Any questions on the initial part of the stories playbook? Pop them in the chat. If you do, or if you want and delay, feel free. Earl will bring it up. Great. So just a couple of quotes that I think are reinforcing. Dr. Zach is a preeminent a neuroeconomist. He's a researcher, and he studies what's called narrative. Think of narrative as stories or the words that you use. And so that's where you see the word narratives that cause us to pay attention, right? Studies after studies, I can show you studies that go back 150 years about how the brain thinks, all the way to today's. And it's all about storytelling such that you can activate potentially 9 different regions of the brain. So you have your senses, you have emotion, you have understanding, you have movement, and there's up to 9 different areas of the brain that you can use in narrative to excite people. Now, Dr. Bruner, I covered up his number, so you'll see the quote suggest we are blank number of times. If you wouldn't mind, Earl, if we could have folks pop into the chat what they think the number is, how many more times do you think we are as human beings likely to remember a fact when it's wrapped in a story? So, Earl, if you just read them off, give people a moment to pop in there what they think the number is.
Okay, Dave Gregg says 10.
Okay.
Mitch Ortiz says 20.
Okay, Mitch. You can do
Let's see
prices
what
right. Anybody want to go with 21
Austin
or
Dillard said 3.
3? Okay, so Austin's on the lower end of 3. Mitch is at 20. Earl, what's your guess?
25.
So you're closest, but you did go over.
Okay.
So for prices right, you don't win. Mitch would win, but you're the closest. Actually, wait, 20 to 22 is 2. Actually, Mitch is closest. Sorry, Earl, you get second place.
Oh man.
So it's 22 times. And Dr. Medina has a different way of looking at it. This is a fun book where he has these varieties of rules that relate to how the brain works. He made it very approachable, the study of the brain. And what I don't think he realized was when he says we don't pay attention to boring things, what I look at it is this: the majority of people that come to me, whether it's for coaching or consulting or training, whatever it is, oftentimes they say something like, my stories are boring, I meander, I ramble, I don't come to a point. It's because people don't have a better tomorrow message to their stories. They don't have a clear takeaway. And so that's what it's all about. Now, you guys know that I love photography. I mentioned that. And one of my favorite photographers is this woman, Christy Odom. She's just, I don't know how many awards she's won. It's over 60. That's what I looked up from her bio. But she's just amazing. And I love the fact that she asks 3 questions. What do I see? What do I feel? What can I eliminate? This is perfect for us as government contractors or anybody that's doing a sales process. What do I see? Think of that as what's the customer all about? What are their problems? What are you trying to solve? What do I feel? Are you creating an emotional connection with them? If you're just doing a dump of data, which is your typical success story, I've seen hundreds, if not thousand, at least 1,000 different capability statements, capabilities presentations in the years, right? I've done tons of programs for government related organizations, including NSVBC. I don't remember when it was. I've done 2 programs for them years back at their conference, right? I've seen them. Almost all success stories, when you do like your oral presentations, are all about facts. Like, we supported the organization in Alabama, we implemented, right? It's just essentially a chronology of events. There's no emotional attachment. It's about people, folks. The government is people, right? It sounds common sense. And yet, my question is, why do you not have people involved in your customer success stories? And a lot of people just shrug. So if you're not making the government feel something when you're doing your presentations, I believe you're literally leaving money on the table. And when it comes to what can I eliminate, brevity is the soul of wit is one of my favorite quotes. Another way of not so nicely saying it is just edit edit ruthlessly. And just as a little bit of an intermission, so to speak, this is some of Christie's favorite photos. This one was hanging in the Smithsonian, Washington, D.C. This one, I don't know how many awards it won. And this is one of my favorites. I don't know how she captured this playful set. She goes to Alaska a lot, so that's just probably where that is. Now, I mentioned this system of credibility, that Better Tomorrow message, and I told you we would cover it a little bit more. So now let's dig in a little bit to the Better Tomorrow message. Probably this is very new for you. If you're a more technical professional, this is going to be a little bit of a challenge for you. So this is going to require some creativity and some collaboration on your part. And the way to think about it is this. If you were to look at this, so this is from the country of Georgia, which is southwest of Ukraine, southwest of Russia, one of the former Soviet republics. I've been to this country twice. as well as several other countries where I was doing what they call technical assistance training or capacity building training. We're doing training, it's just they have a different name for it when you go overseas. And I love taking pictures of different things to show story elements. And you'll see all different types of magazines and newspapers. You might even see Cosmo dead center. Now you'll notice there's Cyrillic, right? The letters of the Russian language. But what you will also notice if you look, especially at the Cosmo, is headlines. All magazines worldwide are built on headlines. That's there to attract your attention. The majority of what they call the pull in advertising and marketing to grab your attention, to get you to pay attention and grab that magazine is the headline. Same thing with the email subject line. Will you read the email from Earl, from me, from whomever, if you're not interested? If you don't know me, it's going to be based on the email subject line. That's what it's all about. So a great example of a Better Tomorrow message is the story I have about Michelle. Now, it's important to realize that Michelle's about 5 feet tall. She's very petite and she works in a hospital environment. So I'm doing a keynote to about 1,200 hospital healthcare risk professionals. So they call themselves risk consultants, risk managers. And they have the unfortunate responsibility, or not responsibility, but the sort of the title of being finger pointers or finger wagglers. What happens is Michelle's of the world, they work in a hospital, and when a patient has a bad experience, usually very traumatic and it's undesirable, they get a complaint. Michelle gets a folder like this thick on her desk, and she has to figure out, is it a people issue? Is it a technology issue or a process issue? Inevitably, it's a people issue because medicine is about people, doctors, nurses, radiologists, whomever is in the room. And when Michelle walks down the hallway, people are expecting to get the finger pointed at them. So this petite woman, who really is not causing any fear of anybody by her physicality, but because of the job that she holds, doctors that are 6 foot plus male who fear nothing normally will scurry like little tiny bugs when you turn the light on because of the finger waggle. And when I do interviews, before I do training and consulting, I do interviews that last 15 minutes, and I tell people in advance I'm going to be done at 14 and a half, and we're going to wrap up at 15 because I really want to make sure that I'm off the phone at 15 or the Zoom or whatever. And I wrote this down because this is how powerful it was. At 14 minutes and 38 seconds, Michelle said this: I make a difference in patients' lives every day. I stopped her and I said, Michelle, this is what you need to say. So here's my question to you folks here. How many of you say something similar when somebody says, what do you do? When you say, I'm a risk consultant, or I work for the name of the company, or you give a title. You're not creating an opportunity for people to get excited. This is what Michelle is doing. She's helping people. Yes, she has the unfortunate role of finding the reasons why a patient had a bad experience. But if you look at it from the positive side, she's here to make sure it doesn't happen twice. That's a really important role when it comes to human beings. And medicine is not a science. So repetition of the good things, templates, models, or whatever that might be, is what the hospital is all about. Jeff Hoffman, I met him during one of the organization CRDF, that I did those presentations overseas near Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Armenia. He was not a State Department ambassador, but they called him ambassador for CRDF. Loved his messages, and I found his TED Talk. So he did TEDx for Wall Street a number of years ago, and it's called The Power of Wonder. And the link will be in your PDF. It will be there so you can access it in YouTube. But I wanted to share just his story. Now, when you listen to the story, I want you to listen for his Remember Better Tomorrow message. Listen for that phrase that's going to get you inspired emotionally. And then the call to action is listen for what he tells his team to do. Okay, so listen for the Better Tomorrow message, listen for the call to action. I'm going to ask you to pop it into the chat box, and let's see how many folks are close to what the Better Tomorrow message and call to action are.
I want to tell you a story. I was in charge of a 5-year-old for the day. And so after a staring contest, first of all, that I somehow lost, I don't know how she got me to back down. She won the staring contest, said, what are we going to do today? I said, I got to go to my office. I said, get in the car. So she starts walking across the room, and she's looking down as she's walking, And she says to me, how do they make carpet? And I said, I don't know. There's machines that sew it and stitch it together, whatever. Just go to the garage, right? So we're walking along. We get in the garage, and she goes over to the car. She taps on the window, and she says, how do they make glass? And I said, I don't know. There's like fire and sand. And she's like, fire and sand? She's given me this look like, remind me not to waste my money on a Yale education. And I'm like, it's seriously, that's how they make glass. Get in the car. Okay? Then she taps on that thing you see, the bar that goes between the two windows. And she says, what is this thing called? And I said, it doesn't have a name. And she said, what is the thing between the two windows? The strip called? I said, it doesn't have a name. Okay? And she said, if it doesn't have a name, how do they order more on the assembly line? Okay, so it's 5-year-old 3, old guy nothing at this point. I said, look, just get in the car. So we get in the car and we drive to the office. When we get to the office, I am walking across my familiar territory through my familiar employees and processes. And there she goes again. I look and I watch in her eyes. She's looking at everything, taking in everything around her and processing it. And then she starts. She says, what is that thing? And she says, why do you have 2 of those things? Why is that girl on the phone all day? What does that guy do? And I said, please take some markers and go draw something on the whiteboard, which she finally did. A bag of Cheetos won that argument. I went and sat in my office, and I sat there for a minute, and something significantly bothered me. And I stood up and I said, wait a minute, why do we have 2 of those? What is that thing, and why is that girl on the phone all day? And I realized something really important. I lost my childlike wonder. I lost the ability to wonder about everything around me because I was busy. We get in our cocoon, right, that we're comfortable. We see the same things every day, so we stop seeing them. And in fact, it gave me a revelation. I went and got my entire management team, and I said, tomorrow I want everybody to come in here and think like a child. I want you to think like a 5-year-old. I want you to bring back childlike wonder, and I want you to question everything we do and why we do it. And the results were absolute.
So that's the story part that kicks off his TED Talk. So in the chat box, like we did for Dr. Pruner, what do you guys think are the Better Tomorrow message and call to action? Better Tomorrow message and call to action. Feel free to read them off again, Earl, please.
Okay. All right. Dave said, be curious and ask questions.
Okay.
Austin says, think like a child.
Okay.
Still waiting for more of a chat to come up. Those are 2 answers I have so far.
Okay, so people can feel free to put those in. So whoever said be curious, so that's what I call a regular message. And the majority of stories out there have no message. That's why people call them boring, meander. They don't have any punch. They don't have any impact. So I think it was Austin that said something like bring back childlike wonder. So you're very close. And that's what it is. Bring back childlike wonder, and call to action is think like a 5-year-old. Now, in my framework, which I call the Great Stories Framework, and I'll show you the link for that as we get closer to the end, what I recommend is that you make these the same. So the way that I differentiate them is the Better Tomorrow message is the feeling you're trying to evoke in your audience. And the call to action is the specific thought and action that you want your audience to take. So if you make them the same, which is very easy once you start practicing and doing storytelling, then they're one and the same. You don't have to worry about what means what. So just a couple of examples. This goes to the other person, I think it was Mitch, that said, be curious, right? So this is what most stories miss. So if you don't remember how to make it, or you don't have the time, or it's just not in your DNA to make it super creative and memorable, like bring back childlike wonder, or I think it's think like a 5-year-old is the better of the two, because that, which I really think is different, is have this no matter what. So at least have a lessons learned and what I call is a universal message. You want your audience to nod their head and go, I agree with you. That's what you're looking for. You want them to nod your head. So I call that the universal message or the universal yes. So you all agree that we need to be curious, we need to think outside the box, be more creative, right? I can go on and on. When you say to someone, think like a 5-year-old, you've changed the way you've given people instructions. You're now changing the way they're thinking. You're changing the way they're feeling because they're starting to process and remember, oh, what was it like to be a 5-year-old? Right, like Regina Dugan, if you've ever heard her TED Talk, when she was the director of DARPA, one of the things that she starts with was her question, which is an unbelievably powerful, open-ended question. What would you do if you knew you could not fail? Wonderful way of kicking it off. And that's her whole message, is all about technology and geeks. She used the phrase that geeks rule the world. And it's very interesting because those are the people that are solving the problems, right? Many of you, right, your small businesses, you probably left your practice, whatever it was that you were doing, because you have this great idea about solving a problem for the federal government. And yes, they have lots of problems, but they're also a big bureaucracy. And that's another thing that Pete, the CTO of DOE, said, don't come in here and tell me that we suck. So what he meant was, if you come in and go, well, these are your 10 problems, and we can fix them. What he wants you to do is come in and go, what's the gap? So explain to us what we have today won't get us to where we are, because what you're doing is you're pointing fingers like Michelle's of the world at what they already did and already invested potentially billions of dollars. You don't want to do that. You don't want to be told that your stuff isn't up to par, and they know it. But that's why they're seeking your help, is how do they become better? So I want to do another little educational exercise with you. And I want you to read a real story. So this is from a program I did with the Mechanical Contractors of America, with their particular office out of Chicago. And Greg was very kind enough to allow me to use his story. So I want you to read this story. And then I'm going to ask you what you think the Better Tomorrow message is for this story from Greg. It is in here. And this is what is very common, is people have great stories and they don't even realize they have the key message right there. So let me give you a minute or so to read this, and then whenever you're ready, pop into the chat box what you believe the key message is, the Better Tomorrow message. So as soon as you're ready, pop in the chat box, and Earl, if you wouldn't mind again.
Okay, nothing yet. I think people are still reading.
Sure. And if you don't know what the Better Tomorrow message, put what you think the message is. And I'll talk a little bit more about how to make it more clever and more memorable. So if nothing else, remember, what is the message?
Okay, we got Dave is typing something in. Just give it a
Okay.
minute here.
Sure.
Dave wrote, be situational aware.
Okay. Be situational aware. Very common phrase in the military.
Right?
Something I try to teach my daughter. I even incented her to, I said, if you tell me how many people are walking behind us, I will give you $1 for each person. And then she turned around. I go, you lost the money. And then I gave up because she didn't really want to do it anymore.
Okay. Dave also wrote, able to discern between the three.
Okay. Any other volunteers in the chat box? All right. So I'll skip this one. So here's some. Dave, those were good. Thank you. So there's no wrong message, folks. No wrong message ever. The question is, what do you want the message to be? What do you want the message to be? Remember, one of my earlier questions was, what do you want to be known for? So that's what you have to decide, because your stories align to your corporate mission, your services, and most importantly, to their problems. What are they looking for? Right? So when they send out an RFQ or an RFI, they're specifically trying to solve X number of problems. And they're looking for vendors that can do this. And if you fall into a social economic category, like for whatever reason, HubZone, an SDVUSB, or what have you, then they're trying to isolate it out to a small business, and they're trying to make sure that three or more can solve their problem, provide that solution. So Greg was all about juggling. He even used his hands. If you look earlier in the second paragraph, third sentence down, he instinctually started moving his hands like a juggler. I even noticed that in the Zoom. So when I said to him, "Is your message think like a juggler?" He looked at me, paused, had that happy little dog puppy face, and he said, "Yes." Right? So that's what you want to do. You want to look for these messages, these nuggets. So if nothing else, you go with something like Dave said, or whatever ideas like these, whatever it is, have a message that is clear, that supports the problem and supports your overall system of credibility, which should be representative of your mission. So what we're going to do now is an exercise for 3 minutes. I recommend doing the founder story. You can certainly do any of the 6 story types, and I'm going to show the 6 story types again after each time I mention the minute breakdown. Okay, so write down your messages. If you're able to, be clever. You don't have to. And then I'm going to ask you to pop some in the chat box. And for those of you that do put it in the chat box, I'm going to make some suggestions right here without even knowing your stories, or ask you questions and then have you put in the chat box again, version number 2, version number 3, and give you really hands-on feedback right away. So that's one of the ways, Earl and I always talked about this. One of the reasons that he did encourage me to and supported me to do the Department of Energy is that I'm all about doing hands-on exercise. So even though we're on a Teams environment or Zoom, whatever you have, if those of you that do training, try to make as many of your engagements hands-on with real practical exercises. So I'm going to show you these, and I'm going to do a countdown. So 3, 2, 1, and then end. And then in between each, I will keep up this stories playbook with the 6 story types. So I'll say, for example, 3 minutes, and then I'll change it to this slide, and then I'll say 2 minutes, and I'll change it back to this slide. Okay, so what I want you to think about is just messages. So just messages. If you can turn it into a better tomorrow message, go for it. You don't have to, just so think about messages. If you can do clever. Now, if you are stuck and you find yourself not as creative in the moment, start writing something, because that will help jog your memory and get your mind starting to write. If you just sit there and analyze and think, then you'll be stuck and you won't be able to do this. Right? I've been doing this a long time, 20 years. The majority of my clients are technical professionals who don't claim that creativity on the spot is their strongest skill, versus, in 3 days, they're going, yes, I've got it. So with this workshop that we're doing right here, it's got to be in the moment. So just start writing something, and don't second guess. Don't squash your inner critic, or don't listen to your inner critic. Just create and write and see what happens. All right. So I'm going to give you 3 minutes starting now. Go. So 3 minutes. And you can put in a message anytime you want into the chat box. So that's 2 minutes, 30 seconds. If you haven't started writing, just put some words down. Any thoughts you have? Okay, 2 minutes remaining, 2 minutes remaining. And again, these story types will be in the PDF that you either grab from Earl or me or watching the video at your leisure when Earl pops it up on the YouTube channel. Okay, 1 minute, 1 minute remaining. Thirty seconds, 30 seconds. All right, wrap up. Okay, so in the chat box, anybody would like, type your favorite Better Tomorrow message. So if you did your elevator speech, a founder's story, or any of the other 6 types, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Just pop in a message. Let's see what you got.
Okay, here's one coming in from Dave.
Okay.
Okay, we got from Dave. Live your best life. Help others live theirs.
So you have 2 messages there, Dave. Okay. Read the second part of that one, Earl, again, please.
Help others live theirs.
So, Dave, is your message the most important part of your message, live your best life or help others? So if you put that in your chat. And another way to think about it is, we help you live your best life, period. Then you can put in your elevator pitch or wherever it is you have your narrative, the fact that you help yourself, you help your team, and you help others live their best life. But by putting "we help you live your best life," the word "you" becomes an open-ended proxy for whoever you want it to be.
Yeah. Well, they responded. Depends on the prospect's needs.
Okay.
But I get your point.
Okay. Yeah. And then always use a "we" statement, even if you are a single person company or you're even a small business. Most people start with "I." Use the phrase "we." It automatically makes you sound like you're a business. When you do "I," it generally makes you sound small. So I always say leave "I" for when you're looking for a job, like an individual person who's looking for a job. And when you own your own business or work for a business, use the phrase "we." Anybody else in there, Earl?
Yep, we got one from Austin Dillard. He writes, let us help you take part in building America's manufacturing capability.
Okay, so Austin, put in the chat, what is the benefit of building America's capability? What's the why? Why should I care? What's the benefit of having a stronger America's capability? And what kind of capability? Earl, if you got another one, we'll wait for Austin to type.
Yep, Austin's typing in this response. Give it a minute here.
Yep.
Anybody else? We can't have Dave and Austin have all the fun. So Austin writes, faster and more agile development.
Okay. So something like, we help you accelerate your software capabilities if I'm using the language that you're using. And then how do you do that? Through agile and software development, right? So we help you accelerate. For in general, for the government, I tell people to use softer language, meaning support or help. For people that are selling to commercial, I usually have them drop the help. You don't have to if you prefer that, and you prefer a little bit of a softer bit of language. Insert the word help. It doesn't really matter. But for people that are more sensitive to that, like government, prefer people that understand the government, and commercial, especially in the US, they understand the phrasing, the more aggressive language. Like, for example, I'm working with a company that is international. I'm going to be traveling to Florida to do a workshop, and about a third of them come from overseas. And one of the gentlemen was laughing at me from Australia. He goes, "Yeah, we don't call it an elevator pitch." So I always know that that's always interesting, but you certainly going to call it, tell me about yourself, right? So you guys got to figure that out. So Austin, what do you think of that? And anybody else, Earl, or just those two gents?
Yep. Look at Dave and Austin are responding. So which
Okay.
one is first? Austin writes, sounds great.
Excellent. Happy to help.
And
And
then
don't
Dave,
stop there. Yeah. Okay. Please start.
yep, Dave is currently typing.
So this goes to everybody. Don't stop with just one, maybe three, two or three that you really like, and then ask some people whom you trust, but don't ask yes people. Don't ask someone who's just going to give you a perfunctory, I like it, looks good. You want someone to ask you some questions, hard questions. Like for me, when I started my business about 21 years ago, and I realized I would say yes, and I meant it. What happened is I didn't showcase my expertise by asking good questions. So I learned over time that if you don't ask tough, difficult questions, you're not demonstrating you're the expert that people want to hire. They're looking for you to ask them difficult questions. They're asking for you to solve their problems. And if they knew the answers and they knew how to solve them, they wouldn't need you. So they need you to ask these difficult questions. So do the same thing on your entire system of credibility, which starts, if you remember, at the center, your Better Tomorrow message. All right, so Dave got to be ready.
Yep, Dave is ready. He writes, what do you think of we believe statements such as we believe great leaders generate more discretionary efforts?
So believe is, it sounds like you're basing it off of empirical evidence. So believe sounds a little squishy if you're using that. So if it's your expertise, you could say, based on 10 years worth of working together, we have found, or there are a variety of studies out there that clearly indicate, right? You could use a little bit of academic language out there if you want to be more aggressive or assertive in your language. Studies show clearly that leaders who do this improve efficiency, operations, whatever it might be. So language really does matter. You got to figure out what matters for you, what you're comfortable, and what your audience is going to appreciate and not appreciate. Like what I always tell people is, and this is hard when it comes to communication, you have to pay attention to what you say, what you don't say, what they say, and what they don't say. So that it's always an ongoing balance. Same thing going back to Greg's story of juggling. You have to understand what's going on. And can the government actually tell you everything? Or do they have to ask you a very structured type of interview or only offer you the same information? Like if you've ever worked with the government, you know you're allowed to ask certain questions. But the government does not respond individually. They post a set of questions by a given due date, and then they answer them or don't answer them. But everybody gets to see the same questions. So you have to decide, do I reveal my hand by asking this particular question, or do you put assumptions in your RFP response? So that might be a little long-winded. Feel free, Dave, to follow up with a more specific question. Also, if you want to wait just a little bit, I'm going to finish up, and then you can feel free to unmute yourself, and we can talk more specifically together. All right. Anybody else who's got a better tomorrow message, Earl?
Nope. That's
Okay,
it.
great. Sure. So this will be again in your PDF. This is a link. This is a shortened link, called a bit.ly link. And this is the long form, which is right below it if you prefer not to use it. And on my website, there is the Great Stories framework in a text-based, field-based form that you can fill out. You can do as many as you want. You can even save them for up to, I think it's a week or 30 days. I think I can't remember. Sorry, I don't remember. And you can put those in there, and that will put into a framework how to tell stories. Like, for example, what is your better tomorrow message? Who are the people that are involved? I call them characters because this is storytelling. What's the setting? What information do you need? What's the impact on you? More importantly, what's the impact on them? So it's all for a field-based form for you to help you fill out everything that you might want to do that comes to more of a story-based narrative, like a 1 to 3 minute story, like the Jeff Hoffman, a success story. So if you think about, if you've never done orals, which is the response that you would have to come in and demonstrate the capabilities of your company, the government oftentimes will prescribe very, very specifically with minutes. You have 3 minutes for your intro, you have 5 minutes for your capabilities, and so forth. That comes out to whatever the timing is. Let's say you have 20 minutes or 30 minutes. When it comes to the capabilities that you would demonstrate in your success stories, there's no specificity whatsoever. It's open-ended. It's one of the only, if not the only, part of how you do your orals that allows you the complete flexibility and creativity. And to me, folks, if you want to stand out and be different, you want to do testimonials, you want to use quotes, you want to use names, you want it to be around people. So this is a flattened version of your system of credibility versus the circle version. Whatever it is, work on this and figure out what's the most important sales tools that you have. They're going to help you accelerate sales. And to me, if you were to ask me in a vacuum, it's having a killer elevator pitch. And those of you that are commercial, work on your LinkedIn profile. Those of you that are government contractors, it's your elevator speech, it's your capability statement and your capabilities presentation, something that I call the big three: elevator pitch, capability statement, capabilities presentation, because all of those encompass pretty much everything else that you have. Because if you think about it, it's just a short or a long version of the same information. So your capabilities presentation has all the same information that your capability statement. It's just a longer narrative. Here's another suggestion, a different way of looking at storytelling is no matter where you are, you're going to have a networking event, you're going to go to a conference, you're going to go to the event, the annual conference for NVSB. Maybe you're going to have lucky that you have a chapter in your area. Like I live in the Washington, D.C. area. I don't know about you, but I'm starting to go and network more regularly now that COVID's kind of settled itself. So I have all of these in my arsenal. I probably have 300 to 400 stories that are listed in my story library. And then I have in any given situation in my brain, maybe 15 to 20 that I have well-versed, well-practiced, that are my go-to stories. On my website, there are probably 20, 21 success stories that span my services of coaching, training, workshops, keynotes, and consulting, right? Everything that a company or a government would come to me for, I have all of that covered. Every tick box for every service, everything that anybody would ever need is covered on the website. Plus, I have other things like YouTube channels and a great deal of content. If I look at your system of credibility, would you be able to say to me, yes, I've got everything covered, And so here's one of the ways to do that is to have these 8 must-have stories, especially number 7 and number 8. People crave connection, crave. We love to feel a connection when we meet with people. If you want to see a variety of story types, stories, sorry, not story types, of stories, there's probably 35 to 37 different stories. I'm constantly adding more and more on the blog. And you can find your own personality. Like Jeffrey Hazlitt, for example, very bold in how he approaches things. People always want to hear a couple of my stories. That's mine on the left. The Cherisher 123 is actually a fabulous story from one of my students from a couple of years ago about family tragedy and how he turned that to something that was very positive. The one on the very, very right is a fabulous message of self-discovery and realization, also from one of my students. So even though they're 19, some of them have just amazing insights because life really threw them for a loop, and they had to grow up, so to speak. Please think about this quote, because to me, especially those of you that have been involved in government contract or even potentially corporate contracting, the government may actually come back sometime and go, you know what? We want to actually engage with you. I know plenty of organizations that didn't get that first contract, but maybe 2 years later, when the contract got renewed, they said, please come back. We want you to bid again, submit your proposal. And they ended up securing it. Or in corporate world, I've had this myself. I was not the first choice for whatever reason, especially for speaking, because often it is personality based. Maybe they felt like somebody who had 3 books is better than me, whatever. Hey, it's the best fit. And the next thing I know, I'm selected for the next year's conference. So whatever it is, 3 big calls to action for you folks. 2 are organizational, 1 is personal. Do a messaging audit across your entire system of credibility. If you know your elevator speech is not getting people to go, yes, tell me more, there's your answer. You already know you need to work on it. Same thing with all the other key parts. Practice. I have worked with people that are making easily millions of dollars in sales, and they don't practice. And sometimes they get lucky, and sometimes they get unlucky, and they come back to me and go, gosh, and they look their head down, and I hold their head down and go, I know I should have practiced more. And sometimes just a few minutes of practicing, if you think about it, a typical story is only 2 to 3 minutes. So how can you not practice that? Go to the restroom and practice for a couple of minutes before you have your meeting, and then start working on your playbook. Whatever it is, you don't have to go crazy with a playbook. A playbook could be super complicated and super comprehensive. Just start putting things in there. Your elevator speech, your founder story. What are your top success stories? If you're just exiting the service and you're transitioning, talk about your big efforts that you did, big projects that you did in the military or whatever particular service that you did, maybe your public health service, for example. You're not the military, but whatever it is, talk about projects that you did that you can forward into the future that make it very, very personal and will resonate because you're solving their problems. Here's my contact info. You can either type info or Ira at the Chief Storyteller. Here's my phone number. Here's my website. Earl will also have that information in the PDF. And I just want to wish everybody well. And if you are in the service or currently, or you're a veteran, I make this offer to you. I will spend 1 hour with you free of charge, no obligation. It's my way of saying thank you from a fellow vet to you, a fellow vet or somebody that's transitioning out. And now the program's officially over, and I'm happy to stay on. And I promise this to Earl because I'm a vet. Anybody that wants to tackle their Better Tomorrow message, their elevator speech, or what have you, I'm happy to have you demonstrate it, unmute, and we can do it together.
Okay, this is great. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to unmute everybody's mic, and you can start shooting away at Ira and ask him any questions. We extended this webinar extra 30 minutes, so the time is now yours. So I'm going to go ahead and unmute. Just give me a couple of seconds here to unmute everybody. Okay, you now could start asking away.
Hi, good afternoon. This is Austin.
Afternoon.
I have a question about getting your stories. So it's there's just so much information out there. What kind of tactics do you use to pick out the best thing that you can think of that will resonate with people, and then consolidate that information and begin to practice that? Do you have a system that you use for that?
Yes, sure. Don't go away, Austin. I want you to stay engaged.
Okay.
So, what are your top stories that you tell today? You don't have to give me details, but tell me like what type. Like I'm telling a story of X, I'm telling a story of Y.
Probably with my children, stories with my children, or some adventure. Like I've tried to rock climb and things like that, and it all went terribly wrong. So I think stories around that.
Okay. So the thing that, and then if you jump on, especially right now, if you have a moment, if you give me a second, and I'm going to put this into the chat box. The story type, where is that? Toward the end. There it is. No, that's not it. There it is. I want you to take a look at this while we're in the webinar and think about what problems you're solving. Okay.
Okay.
And so let's take rock climbing, because I think that's sort of a non-specific, because some people don't like talking about other people's children, whereas rock climbing is still personal to you and is still meaningful to you. So if you take what would be a problem that you are solving that you want to use and illustrate through a experience you had rock climbing?
So I think that's one of the things that I struggle with currently is making that clear connection, and I have so many different stories that I can conjure up, but now it's just a matter of aligning that so that someone else can resonate with that, or at least someone I don't know, right?
Perfect. Yes. Yes. Okay. So pick one problem that you're solving, and I will show you how to get rock climbing into that problem.
Okay. So my business focuses on building electronic manufacturing capability in the U.S.
And what does that mean, electronic manufacturing?
So primarily prototyping for like a case that a circuit board would go in, an enclosure.
Okay. Got it. Call it prototyping enclosures. All right. What's your biggest problem? What's your biggest objection that somebody says, no, thank you, for whatever reason?
We are currently lacking that domestic capability. There's only a limited number of suppliers that are able to perform.
So it's a supplier capability.
Yes.
Do you have domestic suppliers, or it's just slow? Do you have them?
I have some, yes, and I have my own prototyping mill.
Okay. So what's the objection? Is that what, you don't have scalable?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So scalability is your issue. So you're small and somebody wants faster and larger abilities.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So let's use mountain climbing, rock climbing. What is the key challenge to being a successful? So imagine I never climbed and you have 1 minute to explain to me how to be successful as a rock climber. What would you tell me? What are some of the key things to tell me?
Well, preparation, first of all, you need to do your homework. You need to look at the summit. You need to do a little bit of research. Make sure you check your gear and the conditions. And then, you got to take care of your fitness, your health.
Okay. Right there. All of those words are comparable to anything you want to do in terms of delivering a prototype, right?
Yeah, good point. Yes.
So list the key things. You could decide, you gave me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You gave me 6. You can make it 10 if you wanted. You'd want to rattle them off quickly. You don't want to spend too much time on them. And if they make intuitive sense, like I'm not an expert, but I got them all, then you say, Earl, Mr. Client or Mr. Prospect, You know, my experience mountain climbing is analogous to building domestic capability, right? We're a small team right now, but we do everything that you need from prep to climbing. And you'd already told that story, and then you summarize it and come back. And this is exactly what we do. We'll help you scale the biggest mountain if you want to really push this, or we'll help you scale the right mountains or the right rocks. And then you might even bring in the specifics of the rocks. You might say, well, we have circuit types. We have 23 different circuit types. There are hundreds of different types of rocks to climb and mountains to climb, whatever it might be. So you
Sure.
just connect that metaphor with the issues that are on the other side. And that makes it very personal to you.
Perfect. Thank you.
That makes sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah. This is one of the big areas that people don't intuitively get. It's kind of funny, and I'm not trying to be negative. It's just I get this stuff in seconds, and that's why I do it. It's so funny. I have
Sure.
one client, Adam. We started about 2 years ago, and we got to the point where he would just start rambling, and it was literally rambling. And I go, I'm good. And he goes, what do you mean you're good? I go, I got the story. It's all done. I already got it in my head. I just got to type it. And he's going, how are you going to do that? I said, well, you're a whiz at real estate investment. And if I wanted to invest in real estate, I'm going to give you my money. When it comes to storytelling, rely on me. So it becomes part skill. And so you got to work on this a little bit and say, okay, I want to tell a story about a child of mine and how I would make the same example. Like, I'll give you an example. I always tell people, because I'm a words guy. Um, my daughter one day used a word in her writing, and it wasn't even a word that she made up. Sorry, that she saw anywhere, like, because she's an avid reader. She would polish off a book in 2 days, maybe. And I said, "What's this word?" And she said it, and I go, "Is this a real word? This sounds made up." She goes, "Daddy, all words are made up, right?" And I looked at her and I went, "What?" She goes, "Yeah, all words. Somebody made them up." So fast forward, I'm in a meeting with two $1,000 plus an hour attorneys, and I can't mention who, but a very large DC government organization, because I'm here helping them on a super stealthy engagement. And somebody said something, and somebody else said they didn't understand the word, and I told that little quick story, and everybody just cackled. What it did was it reinforced I'm the words guy. I'm the guy that's going to help them with the narrative so they don't have to worry about misunderstandings.
Right.
So I didn't know that I would tell that story, but I had it in my back pocket.
Okay.
So you want to think about the services that you have, the objections that you consistently get. And then generally what I tell people is 3 stories for every objection, 3 stories for every service, 3 stories for every value that you bring. And then it becomes a bit of a matrix. Or one of my old bosses, when I did government consulting, called them a meatball chart or a consumer reports chart. And then you start to go, okay, I need a story to demonstrate capability. I need the mountain climbing story, boom. I need this story, boom, or I need to tell this story, boom. So you have 3 that you might tell for that issue.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
All right, you bet. Anybody else want to tackle a story? I'm happy to help you rearrange it.
Ira, I've got one that I would really appreciate some help with.
Absolutely.
This is Dave, and the organization that I am thinking about for this particular piece. We are a food processing manufacturer, and we are seeking to attract field service technicians, specifically young people who we can get to come into the skilled trades. Many of them whose parents believe that going to a 4-year institution is the only option that they should be considering. And we've been seeing, we get a lot of people who join us that are in their 30s because they went to school, don't find jobs in their area that they studied, and they end up wanting to become field service techs. And so we're trying to attract younger people and talk to them about living their best life, living a fulfilling life through having a skilled trade and getting a head start on others by doing it right out of high school. And I'm struggling with, other than the fact that I can tell them lots of stories of people who work here who went other routes, I'm struggling with how do I connect Not as much with the kids, because the kids oftentimes connect with the money they can make. How do I connect with the parents?
So what I would do, what sounds to me like is you need individual stories that build to a large strategic narrative.
Okay.
So for example, um, is there a profile? Like, do you know, is it what these typical parents look like, where they live? Maybe you need a regional story. Like, do you have favorite states that yield the best results for the candidates?
Yeah, I mean, we are in Missouri and in the Missouri Kansas border area. So we talk all the time about Missouri and Kansas.
Okay, so I would do a couple of things. I would have, if you can, real people pictures of Missourians and what do you say, Kansians,
Yeah.
um, and have the mom and the dad, or even the whole family in the picture, and then you have a little campaign and you have a little success story underneath, and you say something like Ira Koretsky, successful field technician, earning, if you're okay, earning the money or living the best life or whatever. And you have a variety of these, and you have a variety of families, right? You want to have different folks. Maybe you have some older parents, some younger parents, some mixed ethnicities, whatever it is that works. And you, because what you want is people to be able to see themselves in your narrative. The other thing is, I don't have the right message right now, but you'd want to look at and interview some of these successful not students, but recent graduates and people that have entered your program. And so generally, I always tell people, interview people that are younger, and not younger in the sense of age, but younger into what you want. So let's say less than 3 years, 5 to 7 years, and 10 years. You also might want to have specific, because it sounds like you have popularity with people that are in their 30s that are disillusioned, and you create a system of credibility across all these touch points for people that would look like your prospective, what you call them, field service technicians. And then
Yeah,
look
that's
for and look
helpful.
for and then look for better tomorrow messages that come from each person. So I would buy through these interviews, I'd figure out what their better tomorrow messages were. And then from there, um, look at the commonalities, trends, language that's similar, and build from that a strategic better tomorrow message for your entire campaign. So if it's build your next best life, or build your best life by being a field service technician, whatever it is. And it almost becomes also something like 4 out of 5 moms recommend Cheerios or whatever, that kind of mentality. Because if the parents are your objection and your obstacle, then you want to have stories that relate to them and their child. Because I know exactly what you're talking about. When I grew up, I don't remember what it was called, what it stood for, but it was called BOCES, BOCES. It was a type of educational system, and it was about trade. My father would not let me take the small engine repair class, because it was full of BOCES students, and he thought they would be a bad influence on me, and he wanted me to go to college.
Right.
And I'm going, I'd love to know how to fix a doggone lawnmower or whatever now.
Yeah.
Right. But he
Yeah.
thought, and obviously I have to listen to my dad back then, but he was same thing. If you don't go to college, you're not going to make it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we're about the same age, so I totally understand what you're saying. It was never an option for me not to go to college
Right.
or not to even to go to law school. Right.
Okay.
You were going in my family, whether you wanted to or not.
Yeah.
And nowadays I see so many kids that, go to school, drop out, go do something else, and then are trying to find their way 6, 7 years down the line. And we have a really good way to help them earn over $100,000 a year within 2 years. Right. And trying to tell that story to parents, it's like they don't believe us. So I totally understand what you're saying. We've got to get the pictures and the stories to prove it, right?
And
It's like a
video
doubt
would be
effect.
even better.
Video. Got it.
Yeah, real live parents, not actors, right? On the
Yep.
bottom, not actors.
Yeah.
It's real people, the Morgans, the Koretskys, or whoever lives up in Missouri.
Yeah.
And then you also want to put the towns, because I think, especially since you're very localized, you put whatever the town is, so people can say, "Oh, that's the Morgans from Kansas City."
Yeah, for us, it'll be high schools. That's where they go to high school.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
that's how people connect around here.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ira. I really
You're very
appreciate it.
welcome. Absolutely. Anybody else? Any of the other two folks? Anybody want to run a organizational better tomorrow message? Now that you have the ability, we can talk and collaborate like we do now. Anybody want to share their elevator speech and get that improved on the spot?
I feel like you've helped me with ours, live your best life as a field service technician.
Okay, great. Yeah, what's interesting in my area, I've heard maybe 6 months now, one of the electric workers union has been really big on advertising on one of the most prominent radio stations. And they're talking about training and salary. It's really interesting. I wouldn't think that a union would normally be advertising. So either they're hurting or they want to grow.
Everybody's hurting right now to find people.
Yeah. I mean, I had a refrigerator fail on me, and I don't know how many vendors I called, and they just didn't even call me back. That's how busy in my area they are. And it was very frustrating. And then a month later, I get calls back. Oh, I understand that you're interested in refrigerator repair. I'm already done. Because I took a huge risk on some guy that basically answered the phone and went, hello. But I was desperate. And his guy showed up at 5 o'clock on a Friday, and he lived an hour and a half away, and it cost me an arm and a leg. You know what? The refrigerator worked. So it was worth it. But yeah, it's the trade. People don't realize it's like when my water went out. I said to the plumber, I said, you know what? I realized I'd rather have plumbing than electricity. At least now, that day that I needed it.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing that you guys need to talk about, is that it's such an open-ended career of training and stability and healthcare, right? All the things that people care about. Like when I became an entrepreneur, my parents were like, where do you get your healthcare from? Right? They work for billion-dollar companies. They had no idea about what it's like. And you've got to figure out what all those objections are those parents hit on, and you can say, yes, I understand. This is what you're doing. And oh, by the way, your son or daughter could actually get a degree in the evening. There's no stopping them.
Yeah. I mean, we have a program that takes them all the way through a 4-year degree if that's what they choose to do. They just get to work while they're doing it, and they don't owe any student loan debt when they're done.
I mean, you're hitting huge issues.
Yeah.
Huge issues. So that's got to be
One
on
quick
the
question
forefront.
on your website, Ira.
Yeah.
I noticed you have an area that, how'd you learn about this tool? And then like impact on me, number only 1 to 10.
Yes.
What do you mean by that?
Are you a field trade person yourself?
Am I a field service tech?
Yeah. Did you
No.
start there? No. Okay.
No.
So you're
No,
okay.
I did not.
Okay. So if you tell this story, how did you discover this business or this opportunity?
I am friends with the chief executive officer. I've worked with him at other companies, and he asked me to come help him here.
Okay. What part of his dialogue to encourage you, convince you to join, did you feel like you had that light bulb moment and went, yeah, let's talk? Do you remember that?
Absolutely. But I'm highly economically motivated. And so all he had to say was, I'm going to grow this thing from 35 million to $1 billion. I want your help. And I said, I want a piece of the pie. And he said, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, he
But
had,
it's more than that, Austin. If you didn't trust him, you wouldn't have left. You wouldn't have left your old business.
yeah, this is Dave. I totally trust
Oh,
him.
Dave, sorry.
Yeah,
Yes.
I
So
totally trust him.
there's
Yeah.
parts in there that you're not expressing.
Yeah. Well, the idea is, very frankly, it's the opportunity to grow something is always exciting and fun. And I've helped him grow other businesses in the past. And
That is a
So
perfect metaphor for your whole business about helping these young people.
Yes.
It's helping them grow so they can be whoever they want to be and live their best life.
Yeah.
So that's a way to channel some of your passion.
Yeah. I mean, I truly believe if you enjoy what you do and you look forward to getting up every day and going to work, you have the best possible job. And I found that 30 years ago when I was in my mid-20s, and I'm very fortunate.
Yeah.
Most people, I don't think, ever find it.
No, very hard. Like if I knew what I knew now, I probably would not do what I do because the first 5-ish years were just miserable for me. I didn't have any sales process or anything. Oh, so going back to your other question, um, the impact on me. So that story that you just told about why you joined the business is like an 8 or a 9 on a scale of 1 to 10.
I got you.
So you want, more importantly though, you want the impact on them to be high. So if you're choosing a story, you want to find ones that are going to resonate most with them.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah, that tool, if you don't have a workshop where I went over that tool explicitly, not everything is going to make intuitive sense.
Okay. Earl, thanks for putting this together.
No problem. No problem. We got 5 more minutes left. So any last minute questions before we go? Here's your chance. Going once?
No, I
Going
look forward to
twice?
getting the slides. Thank you.
See, I'm gonna work on the slides as soon as we get off the webinar. So you might get them early. You might get them on Friday if I have time. So this is great. Ira, again, my friend, thank you so much for doing this. Everybody on the call, thank you for joining us and being involved with this webinar. And I hope you have a great day. Until next time, we will see you later. And again, if you need to get a hold of Ira, please give him a call or shoot him an email. Be more than happy to help you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Very helpful.
Okay. Thank you. And I'll see you later. All right.